And we're live.
Great. Welcome back, everybody, to Elasmo Week. I'm your host for the week, Dr. David Schiffman. Elasmo Week is an online outreach event about the science of elasmobranchs, shark skates and rays, and the scientists who study them. This week is all about diversity. The goal is to highlight the diversity of scientists, the many ways of doing elasmobranch research, and to show off as many weird and wonderful species as possible. Elasmo Week wants to make a platform where real scientists can share their love and work with the public. And tonight, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Camila Caceres, who was born in Colombia but raised in the United States. She received her bachelor's in biology from Duke University and then went on to be a research assistant at Stanford. There, Dr. Caceres learned the importance of fisheries and fisheries management when it comes to conservation. When she later did her PhD at Florida International University in the White House Lab, she made it her mission to combine research on the socioeconomic and cultural aspects of fisheries with shark and ray biological research. In her PhD, she was able to collaborate and coordinate projects in 5 territories of the Caribbean, including her home country. In addition, mentoring and increasing visibility of minorities, women, immigrants, people of color, and LGBTQ plus students in the sciences is one of her main goals. Take it away, Cami.
Hi, thank you, David. And hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm really excited to share a little bit about my research that I did with my PhD. I know we do have a few families, middle schoolers and high schoolers watching, as well as some famous shark scientists. So I will do my best to make it general, but still informative and fun for you guys. So let me get my presentation ready. Can you see that? Great. Okay, so sharks and artisanal fisheries. So first, let's have a little brief history on fisheries. Here we see some hooks from the Stone Age. The Stone Age actually lasted 3.4 million years. So that's a very long time period. More specifically, these hooks are from the Upper Paleolithic period, which began around 40,000 years ago. So we see already 40,000 years ago evidence of humans fishing and exploiting rivers and oceans to find food and feed themselves. So a little more history of fisheries. Here on the left, we see some hieroglyphics or some drawings from the tomb of Antifoker. If I've mispronounced that, please let me know. And this tomb is actually one of the few funerary complexes known for women of the Middle Kingdom. So I will touch on later on the importance of women in fisheries, but it's really great to see that one of the few tombs that women have does have this hieroglyphic that shows some fishers pulling a line or a rope. We can see some sort of gill or net. It looks like a beach sand that they're maybe pulling in, as well as a variety of fish and even some birds. So it looks like maybe even 40,000 years ago, or sorry, this one's from 4,000 years ago, there was already a little bit of bycatch. So the term bycatch means when you catch something in a fishery that you did not intend or that was not the target. So oftentimes bycatch is discarded dead and is a bit wasteful. But again, I'll talk about the term bycatch later in the context of artisanal fisheries. And then here on the right, we see some paintings from the Garden of Nebamun's tomb painting. So this is from around 3,000 years ago, and we see some of the fish that are important for the diet of the people of the Nile, and that includes some drawings of tilapia. So 40,000 years ago, we see some evidence of fishing, and 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, we start seeing some art that depicts the importance of fishing for humanity. So fisheries, even though we've been fishing for many thousand years, overfishing has only been a local and regional problem for a few hundred years, or really the past 100 years. The term overfishing means when you fish too much, too often, and the fish is not able to reproduce and bounce back at a rate fast enough that we're taking it out of the ocean. So that's what overfishing means. So even though we've been fishing for a really long time, overfishing has only been a recent problem in the scale of time. Overfishing has accelerated since the rise of the Industrial Revolution with the rise of industrial fishing. So here on the right, we see an image of an industrial fishing vessel. You can tell that they're very large, very expensive, lots of technology, and these ships are usually able to go a lot further, deeper, and stay at sea for a long period of time. There was a study actually that found that industrialized fisheries can diminish biomass, and biomass is just like all the weight of the fish together, all the mass of fish that you can find in an ocean or in a region. It can be diminished by 80% within just 15 years. So again, even though we've been fishing, eating fish for thousands of years, really it's only been in the last 100 years that we're starting to see a massive effect on our ecosystems and our resources. So I'll be talking a lot about fisheries today. Before I do that, I do want to define some terms that sometimes are a little bit confusing or used interchangeably, but it is very important to know the difference. So a commercial fishery is a fishery where you catch the seafood for profit. The fisher goes out to sea to catch something with the intent of coming back and selling it. So it's a business. That's what a commercial fishery is. Now we have also what we call small scale fisheries. Now small scale fisheries really just refers to the size of the boat or the fishing crew. So as we can see in these pictures, they're very small boats, maybe with 1 or 2 crew, maybe up to 5 or 4 or 5, but still very small compared to those big industrial fishing ships. Now, the 3 terms underneath small scale are all considered small scale because they're all done with small boats and a smaller crew. So recreational fishing is something that the fisher goes out to do for pleasure or for competition or as a sport. So they want to catch something, but maybe they'll eat it, maybe they'll release it, but it's not a business. It's for fun and for pleasure. The term artisanal fishing refers to how much technology is in the fishery. So just like artisanal soaps or artisanal jewelry, the term artisanal means handmade or low technology. So as you can see the pictures on the right, these are artisanal fishers. They're very common in developing countries of Latin America, Africa, and Asia. And as you can see from the bottom picture, sometimes you don't even need a boat. They fish with what they have and with what they can. And then the last category or term of fishing is sustenance fishery. And this is a fishery where the fisher goes out to catch food to feed themselves and feed their family. So it's not a business, it's not for sale, it's not a sport or a fun activity, and they're doing it to feed themselves. So oftentimes artisanal fisheries are sustenance fisheries. And both of those are considered small scale. Now, artisanal fisheries, again, means low technology. So sometimes artisanal fishers keep the catch to feed themselves, but sometimes if they're able to, if there's the demand, they can sell it and also make money from it. So artisanal fisheries can be both commercial and sustenance, but again, all 3 of these are considered small scale due to the small size of the boat and the crew. Nonetheless, small scale fishers account for more than 95% of the fishers around the world. So even though we usually think of industrial fisheries and their big boats and the impact that they have, the majority of the fishers around the world are actually considered small scale. Additionally, it's estimated that small scale fishers can contribute around 52% of the global catch. Now, this is an estimate. It can be as low as 30 and as high as 70. It depends on the region and the country. But I think, for example, on Western Africa, up to 70% of the total catches for that country comes from small scale fishers. So the term small scale is actually quite misleading because we think that the scope is small or that the prevalence is small. But as you can see, this is a very important fishery. So why study artisanal fisheries? It's important to study artisanal fisheries because there's no official landing sites or records kept. So like I mentioned, oftentimes these fishers are using it to feed themselves or maybe sell a little bit. So they leave from their home, they go fish and they come back and they never go through a market or any sort of landing site where records can be kept and standardized. Additionally, like I said, these are sustenance fisheries. So oftentimes the catch never enters the market and we have no dollar value associated with this fishery, even though it's very important to the livelihoods of the local communities. Artisanal fisheries are also very hard to study because they're not seasonal. So unlike industrialized fisheries where maybe there's a high season to catch shrimp or to catch lobster, with artisanal fisheries, they're year-round because they're trying to feed themselves or to sell some of it. So it's something that requires year-round monitoring. Also, artisanal fisheries don't have a target catch. So instead of fishers going out to catch tuna or something specific, they're trying to catch whatever they can with whatever they have available. And so that's what multi-gear means as well, that they're using all the gears available that they have to catch what they can. Now, since I've been defining a lot of terms, I'm also going to take the time to define the term fisher. A lot of the times when I talk about fishers, people seem a little confused or they don't understand that I'm talking about a fisherman. But the reason why I choose to use the term fisher is because there's an estimated 2 million women that participate in nearshore artisanal fisheries worldwide. As you can see from the pictures, it's not just men that are active in this fishery, women also play an important role. And it's actually estimated that women contribute to around 11% of the global catch for small-scale fisheries. And actually in the Pacific, so in certain regions, it can be much higher. For example, in the Pacific, women actually account for more than half of the annual small-scale catches, 56% total. And it's estimated that women contribute $363 million to the global economy through fisheries. So the role and impact that women have in the fishery is very important. And even in the regions where the men are the ones to go fish and come back, oftentimes women are the ones who clean the catch and sell the catch. So they are a very important part of the fishery sector. And this, I want to go back to this 2 million women. That is a number for artisanal fisheries. But here in the US in 2018, we did have 16 million women registered as recreational anglers. So there's millions of women around the world that are fishers. Additionally, the term fisher is a gender neutral term, so it's very appropriate for any non-binary people. So I really encourage all the young scientists to try to use the term fisher as we move forward with the literature. Now, fisheries, artisanal, recreational, sport fisheries, they tend to select for mid to large body sizes, either because they want the most meat that they're able to get out of an individual, or they want the highest quality meat. And in the case of recreational fishing, maybe they want the thrill of the catch of a very large animal and maybe a very large trophy that they can then display. And so fisheries in general can have the biggest impact on species that occupy the higher trophic levels. Now, trophic levels is just the science word for what we learned was the food web or the food pyramid. It's a lot more complicated than the simplified version we learned in general biology. But really, just to point out is that sharks tend to have that higher food web level that makes them really important for the ecosystems. So I've talked a lot about fisheries, and I know you guys came here to hear about sharks. So let's talk a little bit about that history. So I mentioned fisheries have been going on for at least 40,000 years. We see evidence of them in art and pyramids around 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. But for sharks specifically, archaeologists discovered remnants of shark bodies beneath the ruins of an Aztec temple around 600 years ago. The temple is dated, not when they discovered it. And so usually in these pyramids, when they buried the influential people, they would bury them with treasures, which would usually be precious gems or metals, as well as food for the trip to the afterlife. So it is assumed that the sharks that they found in these pyramids were a food offering. Similarly, shark fin soup dates back to the Seng dynasty, so around 800 years ago, that we start to see Chinese starting to eat the shark fin soup. So we see evidence of different cultures around the world eating sharks, 800 to 600 years ago. Can't talk about shark fishing without mentioning shark finning. So finning is the act of cutting the shark's fins off and throwing the rest of the body back in the water. Oftentimes the animal's still alive when it's thrown back in water, and so it suffers a very slow and painful death. The reason why the sharks are finned are for a shark fin soup. So they turn the fins of the shark into this noodle-like structure, as you can see in the picture on the bottom left. And the fin itself can go for very, very expensive, I believe $450 for a pound, but the market value changes every day vastly. But on average, if you want to buy a nice, expensive, but not too expensive bowl of shark soup, it goes for around $90. So really it's considered a status symbol in Asia. Often if people want to show a little bit of their money, they choose to serve shark soup at their wedding or at an anniversary, birthday, any sort of big life moment. The interesting part is that it actually doesn't really have a taste. It's more of a structure that the shark fin is used for. And so here's an image of shark fins being set out to dry. It just gives you a really clear image of the scope of the amount of sharks that have been caught for this fishery. But again, this has been going around for around 800 years or so, and it's only become a problem in the last few decades. So why do we worry so much about shark fisheries? Sharks are fish, but they're fish that have skeletons made out of cartilage, like what you find in your nose. And so compared to bony fishes, the fish that don't have a skeleton like that, sharks are more susceptible to fisheries. And that's because they tend to have a slow growth. So it depends on the species and the region, of course, but sharks tend to grow very slowly. They additionally reproduce very slowly, or they can take many years to reach maturity, sexual maturity. And another thing that makes sharks susceptible to fisheries is what we call post-capture mortality. And so this is a little more specific to recreational fisheries, the type of fisheries where they're not trying to sell or eat the shark, they're doing it for the sport. And so oftentimes recreational fishers do release the shark after they've taken a picture with it and they've caught it and they've had the thrill of the moment. But the problem with that is that certain species, after they've been released, may not recuperate fast enough because sharks need to swim constantly to be able to breathe. And if they're not swimming, they get stressed out really, really easy. And so many sharks that are caught do suffer from post-capture mortality. And again, these are characteristics that makes them more susceptible than bony fish, for example. Okay, so to talk a little bit about my project, I used two main methods. The first one was in-person interview surveys. So myself, as well as a team of collaborators, went out to fishing communities to interview fishers about their practices, and more details on that coming. And the other method that I used were baited remote underwater video surveys, or BRUVs for short. And again, I'll go into those details in a little bit. So why should we interview fishers? And if a fisher fishes 5 hours a day for around 5 days a week for 20 years, that is over 36,000 hours of experience that they have. A scientist like myself, as much as I love sharks and research, I don't spend that much time on the water. And so it's super important to learn from the communities that are actually fishing every day and they're every day living, growing up in that environment and depending on the environment for their livelihood. So for my interview questions, I did ask fishers whether sharks were a primary catch or what I called a preferred species. Were they going out to fish to target sharks? Was that one of their main goals when they go out to fish? Or are sharks a secondary catch, or what I call a byproduct? So earlier I mentioned the term bycatch, right? When something is caught that is not what was intended. However, in artisanal or sustenance fisheries, where fishers are trying to catch whatever they can with whatever they have, bycatch is not really applicable. The term is more of a byproduct, because even though it might not be what they wanted or intended to catch, they do keep and retain almost everything that they get. I did also ask if they caught a shark, whether they chose to release it alive, throw it back dead, fin it, sell it, consume it, or trade it. And I use this FIO ID guide. It's a really great guide because it shows you the drawing and the image of what the shark looks like, as well as similar species, look-alike species that might be a little confusing, so that the fisher can compare them next to each other when he's answering the interview questions. And so here you can see the fishers, they actually love the ID guide. They love going through it because I was able to do this project in various regions. They were always curious to see, what sharks could be found elsewhere. And this ID guide also had a ray section. So I did also ask questions about that, because sharks and ray together are elasmo brains, which are fish that have that cartilage skeleton. The second method that I used were the baited remote underwater video surveys, a BRUV. And so a BRUV really is just this picture that you see right here. It's a tripod or a 4-pod with a camera, usually a GoPro attached to it. And then right in front of it, you have a cage where bait goes in. And so with that bait, it attracts sharks and rays to the front of the camera, and we can see what species are there in a relative abundance. What's great about this method is that there's no stress for the shark. The sharks are not being caught and released. We're not taking any sort of muscle or blood samples from them. So particularly in developing nations where shark populations are small, we don't want to stress out and have any sort of post-capture mortality in these regions that already have low shark relative abundances. This project was done with FinPrint. FinPrint is the world's largest coral reef shark and ray survey. And so it was great to be able to help and participate with this project. There was a publication that came out recently. So I do encourage you guys to read that if you want to. So for the BRUVs, we did around 50 drops at each reef. Before we went out, we mapped what the reefs look like and decided what a singular reef was. Usually it's an area of 4 kilometers square. And then we did 50 different camera deployments in that 4 kilometer square area at least. Each drop was simultaneously at least 1 kilometer apart. So because we were afraid that all the cameras were put close together, that there might be one single shark that's just going through all the cameras, and so being recorded multiple times. So we put the cameras far enough apart from each other that we would minimize any sort of potential error at recording the same shark twice. We used 1 kilogram of oily fish bait. So we did want a bait that was very bloody and oily so that it would be taken by the current as far as possible to attract any sharks that were in the region to be filmed on camera. And for my site specifically in the Caribbean, they were deployed for at least 85 minutes of filming time so that we were able to film for as long as possible to see if any sharks showed up. Like I said, so this is just 90 minutes. It's a great image, but it is limited by visibility and environmental conditions. And like I mentioned, fishers have a wealth of hours logged into their brain and experience. So it's really great to use both of these methods to just get an idea of what the fishes are doing, as well as what do the coral reefs look like. And I would like to show you a quick video because I know everybody loves shark videos of what the GoPro video from the Bravo looks like. Just gonna skip ahead a bit.
I'm not seeing the video on the screen. I still see your PowerPoint, Cami. Sorry.
So this is the image that you would see from the point of view of the GoPro. As you can see, the bait is right in front of it, and we can see the types of sharks that are attracted to the camera in the nearby region. What's great also about the Global Finprint project is that you can see it's not just sharks and rays that are recorded in camera. You get to see tons of fish, the occasional turtle, and we've had even dolphins show up on a few bruvs. So it's a really exciting way to see what sharks are in the area. For my PhD, I spent many, many days and hours, I'm pretty sure it was a couple months, just sitting in front of a screen, watching these videos. Sorry, guys, I just heard that you could not see that.
Yeah, cannot see the video, just seeing your PowerPoint.
That's really unfortunate. I will try again.
There we go.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not sure if you guys can see it, but I can always share it later. Okay, well, I'll just move on. I'm not sure if you guys were able to see that or not. Okay, so this project specifically was done in the Caribbean. I sampled quite a few. No, I'm sorry guys. Having some difficulties. Okay, so anyways, this project was done in the Caribbean in a few different regions. I sampled the Caribbean coast of Colombia. Colombia does have 2 different coasts, both Pacific and Caribbean. So specifically, we can see now you can't see. Oh my goodness. Can you see the PowerPoint now? Okay. All right, sorry guys, a little bit of a delay on the Wi-Fi, but I will be sharing that video on social media if you guys want to see it. I do recommend you check out the Global Finprint webpage. There's lots of really cool videos and images there. So for my project specifically,
we can see the screen.
Sorry guys. So this project was done in the Caribbean, and in Colombia specifically, I did it on the Caribbean side, not the Pacific side. We also sampled the Lesser Antilles, which are these islands on the eastern side of the Caribbean, both Guadeloupe and Martinique, as well as Trinidad and Tobago. So why Latin America? Actually, a study was published today that shows Latin America as the most biodiverse region in the tropics compared to Afrotropical and Southeast Asia. I do believe the majority of this data comes from terrestrial biodiversity, but nonetheless, it's great to point out that the regions around the world that have prominent artisanal fisheries are the same regions that have high biodiversity. So it's really important to study that relationship between fishers and nature. So for Colombia specifically, as I mentioned, I did the Caribbean side. Why Colombia? Colombia is actually the second most biodiverse country in the world, only after Brazil. Brazil does have higher biodiversity, but that's because they're a much larger country. If you actually do it by density divided by the area, Colombia is the most densely biodiverse country in the world. And there's an estimated 56,000 species that you can find there. I love this map. It was actually made by World Wildlife Foundation, and it shows some of our iconic species, including whales on the Pacific coast, pink river dolphins in the Amazon River, and right here up in this northern area where you see the coral reefs is where my project was done. So a little background info on the artisanal fisheries. There's an estimated 12,500 artisanal fishers in the Colombian Caribbean. The most common gears were gill nets, trawls, traps, and single line hooks. So these are gears that are very common throughout all artisanal fisheries. However, there's not any detailed information specifically on artisanal elasmo brink, so shark and ray catches, byproduct, or bycatch. Specifically, this project was done in a National Natural Park, Corales del Rosario in San Bernardo, off the coast of Cartagena. So outlined in white, you can see the whole park, but these more turquoise regions are where the coral reefs are. So that's where the BRUV sampling was focused, in the north and the southern areas of the park. So 2 islands were sampled in the north, 2 islands were sampled in the south, and 1 island was protected in the north, 1 island was protected in the south, and the other 2 were open to fisheries. Now, these were only artisanal fisheries. Within the park, industrial fisheries are prohibited. So this was a great area to see the impact of artisanal fisheries on coral reefs in an area that's close to a high population, because the other 2 areas of Colombia, or the other 2 natural parks that have coral reefs, are a little more remote. So their relationship with the human communities might not be as obvious or as strong. 191 interviews were also collected around the 7 main fishing towns, and about half of them were inside the protected area and about half of them were on the outside of the protected area. What was really great specifically about this site is that the vast difference between 2 of the islands that I sampled. So on the left, we see Isla del Tesoro, which is literally Treasure Island. It's an island that belongs to the president of Colombia. not the current president, but just whoever is president at that moment. Their island is completely uninhabited and at their disposal for whenever they want to have a private getaway. And on the right, we see El Islote de Santa Cruz, which is actually the world's most densely populated island. There's an estimated 1,200 people living in this area, and it comes out to around 10 people per meter square. So it's a very, very populated island. So it was great to have both of these islands serve as a natural human population gradient to see the effect of local artisanal fisheries on the surrounding coral reefs. The other region that I sampled for my project was the Lesser Antilles. So the Caribbean has many, many islands. Most of the famous ones are the larger ones like Cuba and the Dominican Republic. But there are many other islands on the eastern side of the Caribbean. And specifically in the Lesser Antilles, we sample with our collaborators, Guadeloupe, Martinique, and Tobago from Trinidad and Tobago. Just like Colombia, there's not any reliable official government records of the artisanal fleet, what areas they fish or what gears they use. And specifically, there's no information or detailed information on shark and ray catches in these fisheries. So first, I'd like to talk just a little bit about Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago is an island nation. It is, however, composed of two different islands, both Trinidad and Tobago. So Trinidad is the much larger one. Most of the large cities are there. It's all the cities are huge, very densely populated. And so it's a very urban type of island. In comparison, Tobago does not have any large cities. It's a much smaller island and a much smaller human population as well. So actually in Trinidad, there was such bad visibility from the discharge coming from Venezuela that we really weren't able to put our cameras there and be able to film anything. It would all look just like a green wall. So we did focus most of our research on Tobago. Now, Trinidad and Tobago is really interesting in comparison to Colombia or the other Lesser Antilles islands in that they do have a strong culture of shark eating. So on the left, we see an image of the shark and bake or bacon shark. The order of how you say it actually depends on whether you're in Trinidad or Tobago. But bacon shark really is just a fried piece of shark in a fried bread sandwich with a variety of vegetables and sauces. And it's a very common street food. It's very common for workers to go eat a sandwich, a shark and bake during their work break. I believe the average is that it's eaten 3 to 5 times a week for the average Tribagonian, which is actually what they're called. So it's a huge cultural staple for them. Just like I mentioned, the Mexican and Chinese cultures in Trinidad and Tobago, there's also a strong culture of shark eating. So it's a very interesting island to research as well. In Tobago, there's an estimated 1,200 artisanal fishers. We interviewed 191 of them, and we did also deploy 50 of these brubs per site at 4 different reefs. And then the last 2 islands that I sampled were Guadeloupe and Martinique. Guadeloupe and Martinique are actual French territories, so they do belong, it's an overseas territory of France. They do belong to the European Union. And so they have a very different socioeconomic and cultural background to the Colombian or Tribagonian fishers. There's an estimated 2,200 fishers, interviewed 191, but that was actually only in Guadeloupe. We interviewed an additional 91 in Martinique, and we again deployed 50 brubs at 4 different sites. So I'm just gonna tell you some of our general conclusions for all of these sites. I know I just went over a lot of information, So I don't want to overwhelm you guys, but it is important to know some of the takeaways. So from the surveys, we found out that sharks and rays were not a preferred target species. Fishers were not going out to purposely catch a shark or a ray, but if they did catch it, they were almost always retained. Estimated Elasmo brains landed in artisanal fisheries are between 2 to 7 times what was reported to the FAO. So the FAO is the United Nations agency in charge of fisheries and agriculture. And all countries have to report to them what they're catching. And from our surveys, we saw that what's being reported actually might be not an accurate representation of artisanal fisheries, because they don't enter a market. So it might be 2 to 7 times of what's being reported, but again, it depends on the region. We saw very few shark species on our BRUVs, unfortunately, which shows that low relative abundance and potentially hints at the reefs already being overexploited. And most importantly, both in Colombia and in Guadeloupe, there was no difference between protected and unprotected areas, which just highlights that in these developing nations where there's not anyone to enforce the rules, it's really important that the community is part of making the rules so that they will self-abide to them and conservation measures will be successful. Because if we enact policies or conservation measures that the fishers choose not to follow, if they choose to ignore them, then it's not going to be successful. So these studies really highlight the need to include the community as well as any cultural and socioeconomic aspects to the fishery for conservation and management. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me through Twitter and Instagram. You can also check out my webpage, camilacaceres.com. And last but not least, I do want to give a quick shout out to the Gills Club. The Gills Club is an organization by the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy where they're building to connect young girls with shark female scientists. They just released a new app that young girls can use to learn about sharks or to learn about scientists. And so we're putting lots of content on it. We're still building on it, or they are. I am just helping them for the month of September. So I really want to encourage anyone that knows a young girl or a young kid, anybody who is interested in sharks and wants to learn more about female shark scientists. This is a really great app and a really great effort by the Gills Club team. So thank you to them for that. And that is all that I have for today. I'm sorry about the video glitch problems, but for sure, all those videos are available on the Global Finprint website.
Great, thanks, Cami. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I need you to stop sharing your screen. You're the host because my internet cut out, so I have to have you do this. So thanks for a great talk. Thanks for everyone for watching us. I'll remind you that we have another talk coming up in just 15 minutes if you're watching live. And for everyone who wants to ask Cami a question, you saw her social media information, or there'll be a live Q&A with all the Elasmo Week speakers on Sunday evening. So you can ask your question as a comment on this YouTube video. You can tweet it at Cami. You can tweet it at Elasmo Week. And we'll see you. There are also more talks tomorrow, and we'll see you in a few minutes. Cami, I need you in the upper left. It says live on custom streaming service. There's a drop-down menu. Click